the self. My name is Siyabonga Zwane. So you have seen the slide, they say SI Zwane. So my name is Siyabonga Zwane. Mr. Siyabonga Zwane, you can also call me Sia. Feel free to call me Sia. I'm tutoring both modules, PYC 1501 and PYC 1502, which is basic psychology and psychology in society. Psychology in society, applying psychology in society, applying psychology to external context. How can you apply psychology into professional context, external context, whether through community, workplace, educational setting? That's how you apply psychology. The self. What is the self? Before we continue or begin, what is your understanding of the term self? It says, in everyday language, we do not have a problem with the meaning of the word self. The word self to ourself is an obvious way. The self referring to you as a person. It is implicity when you use the I or me. So the word self is whereby you use the word I or me. It is not something that we get confused about. However, the self also appears in psychology, and when the term self appears in scientific discipline, it has to be defined accurately and unambiguous. Yes, as ordinary people, ordinary person, and the concept self is me and I. However, since you are a psychology student, you need to have an ability to define the word self accurately, more accurately, not just like any other person. We need to define the word accurately, not ambiguously. However, it is not an easy task to define the notion of self. It says, in everyday language, we skip seemingly between a very different meaning of this term. Now, and again, we will come across with the different meanings of the term, of the concept of self. We sometimes refer to the self as an object. At times, we say the self as an object, like you, meaning you're referring to you. When you say to someone, no, it is you who stole chicken, meaning you are referring you as an object. You are referring to you as an object. They say the self can be used as an object. For example, when you say, I will do something myself, what we actually say that I am the person. Or do something myself, meaning I am the person who will do something. In another way, we refer to the self as an object called the person. But on another occasion, we use the word self as indicating the perception we have of ourselves, such as when we say, I'm not good at telling jokes. When you say I'm not good at telling jokes, meaning you're referring to you, your inner being, your personality. In psychology, we distinguish between the term nature of self as well as the content of self. You'll see it in your study materials, the nature of self and the content of self. When you define the self, you use the two concepts, the nature of self as well as the concept of self. The nature of self has to do with the concept of self. The question to ask is, what is nature? What is the nature of the thing that we refer to as the self? What is the nature of the thing that we refer to as the self? In other words, what is the concept of self in psychology? Remember, we're aspiring psychologists. Our ways of doing need to differ. We need to be recognizable. Hence, when you explain self, we'll take you back and say psychology says, then the general says. Psychology says, and the general says. What is the concept of self in psychology? The same. The content of self. Remember the content. If I say to you, what is the content of PYC 1502? The content will tell me that the content of the book is based on stress, human motivation, interpersonal relationship, psychology in society, psychology work, the self, meaning that's a content for PYC 1501. However, the content of self, what is the content of self? You say, on the other hand, refer to the self-concept. So the content is what describes you. Who are you? What describes you? You break down yourself as chapters. I'm Sia, friendly. I'm an extrovert. I'm enthusiastic. Enthusiastic. I'm an honest person, meaning you're breaking down yourself. Yes, the content of self, who you are, when you break it down to people. When you go for an interview, they say, tell us about yourself. Then you start saying, I'm 23 years old. I'm interested in working with people, whether in groups or individually. I possess a qualification in psychology. You break it down. My prior experience includes, you break it down, meaning that's the content of self. That's who you are, is an information that you don't know. For us to know, you need to tell us. That's the content, your uniqueness. You say the content of self, on the other hand, refers to the self-concept. Here the question is, how do we perceive them? How do we perceive themselves? In other words, what do you think they think of themselves? What do you see? How do these self-conception come about? It is important to keep the different concepts of self and the concept in mind when we talk about the self in psychology. In this session, we'll consider the concept of self, the nature of the self. Now we are starting. That was just an icebreaker. For you to master the self, you need to focus on what? The concept of self, the dynamics of self, as well as the foundations of self. Your study materials will tell you, they say the nature of self. This is the nature of self. It's divided into three: the concept of self, the dynamic of self, as well as the foundation of self. Before you continue, let's break down the terms. It is always important to break down the terms before you go through into the content. They say the concept. The concept most of the time is the definition, the description. They'll ask you what's the concept of your discussion, meaning you need to give them a summary. That the topic will be based on 1, 2, 3. That's the content, the concept. So the concept of the Bible, the concept of the Bible, for instance, is the religion and the truth. That is the concept. The concept of the self. What is the concept of the self? What defines human being? What defines human being? What defines the self? That is the concept. Then they say the dynamics. The dynamics, you think of the breakdown. The dynamics. What are the dynamics of the self? The breakdown of self. How can you understand self through patterns? How can you understand self through categories? That is the dynamics. So you play around with words to make it much simpler for you in order to understand the content. Then the last one, they say the foundation of the self. The foundation, when you build a house, you start with what? A foundation. You start with foundation, meaning you dig and lay your concrete on the floor so that the house will be stable enough to stand. So that is the foundation of self. Where does the self begin? In order for us to understand the self, where can we begin? How can you break down the self from the beginning? That is the foundation of self. The concept of self. Remember, the concept of self, the dynamics as well as the foundation. Now, the key is the concept of self. What is the concept of self? They say self is the core of our continuous over time. Self is the core of our being, continuous over time. However, it is the totality of our experiences. Self is the core of our being, continuous over time. However, it is the totality of our experiences. Why are they saying the continuous over time? It is because we learn every day. We discover new things every day, whether about ourselves or about other people. We never stop You never stop learning an individual. Because now and again, we develop. Situations develop us. We are transformational. We are not stable. We are not fixed individuals. We change. We develop over time. So they say self is the core of our being, continuous over time. Now and again, you develop. Situations changes you. Challenges influences you. Success influences you. Problems that you face influences you. The more you change environment, you develop as a person. That's how it is. That's how it's nature. We are not fixed. We are not robots. However, we are like computers. Computers, now and again, they need to be updated. People will tell you about plants, those systems, they say Pentium 1, Pentium 2. We have iPhones, we have Huawei, we have Nokias. Now and again, they change phones yearly. The phones develop, same as people. We upgrade. The more we get contact to the society, other people will upgrade. So self is a core. The way you define yourself this year might be different from next year. You go to interview, tell us about yourself. You tell them you get a job. You move to the next interview after a year. Perhaps you will tell them the same thing, but there will be additions because you have developed over the year. Self is the core of our being, continuous over time. However, it is the totality of our experience. The self, ourself, are made up of the totality of our experience. Like I've said, the more you experience, the more you encounter certain things, the totality, the wholeness. That is your made up of experience. That is yourself. Stable versus changing. But before we get into that, it says we all have a sense of self. We all have the sense of self. We think of the self as the core of our being, as something that is continuous over time, but it is also the totality of our experience. That includes our thought process, the way we think develops. If it doesn't develop, meaning there's something that you're not doing right. Yes, down again, you need to read. You need to be excited to acquire new information. Our physical body also changes. We are not only changing internally, also our appearance changes due to nature, the food we eat. Do you exercise? Are you happy? Our body changes. They say our physical body, the experience that we separate and unique from others influences us. However, if you look closely at the description of the concept of self, we can identify two issues. They say if you look closer into the description of the concept of self, there are two key aspects. Those two key aspects are, they say number one, the core for our being, as well as the totality of our experience. The totality of our experience as well as the core of our being. They say those are the two keys for you to understand the concept of self. So let's break it down. The core of our being as well as the totality of our experience. Then the another issue would be the fact of self-thinking of ourselves, the self-thinking of ourselves, the way we think of ourselves. Remember, there's that external seer. People will say things about me. Then there's that seer who say I am because of 1, 2, 3. The I, others say you are. That most stable self versus the changing self. For us to understand the core self, the totality, let's look at the stable self versus the changing self. It says, when everybody refers to a past situation and remarks that she was a different person, we understand that she does not mean this literally, that she was a different person. However, in some instance, the person is still the same person. You are still the same person, yet she is also different in the sense that she would experience things differently given the same situation now. They say She has changed as a result of the new experiences, new knowledge, new information. Yet deep down, underlying the various reasons which has changed, she knows that she is still the same person. The concept of the self embodies both these ideas simultaneously, but it is doing so to cover certain aspects or certain problems. It says stable versus self. Erickson. So at times you'll notice that at times I read from your study material, then I come back to my notes. I read from the study materials, I come back for my notes. So listen carefully. If you are lost, just know that I'm reading from something or I'm explaining something. The stable self is Erickson and Rogers and Maslow. There are two theorists who explain the stable self versus changing self data. Let's start with Erickson. Erickson suggests that the idea of identity describes the self as a stable core. The idea of self-identity describes the self as a stable core, beliefs and values. Your stable core, beliefs and values. What defines you? What defines you as Ayanda? What defines you as Usubusiso? What are your belief system? What are your values? That's a core self. Normally, it does not change. The core self. That one, it normally does not change. Let's look for an example. They say to us, one of the most influential theories of identity formulation come from the work of Erickson. Come from the work of what? Erickson. Once identity becomes fixed during the developmental stages of adolescence, when one experiences the pressure of one transition from being a child to being an adult. So they're saying there's that one core of you that does not change, regardless of the situation or over time. The core you, which they say which is influenced by the beliefs and values. So your level of respect could be one of the examples. Or when you say to a person, or when a person is shy, those could be one of the core stable self. You are shy, meaning you'll grow up shy. However, not that you won't be able to manage certain situation, you won't be able to perhaps do some presentation. However, that's your core ability, perhaps influenced by the heredity. Your dad was shy, you are also shy, your mother perhaps is shy, your sibling. You are known as a shy family, you are known as a talkative family, you are known as a go-getters, meaning that's your core stable personality. You are known as an introvert or an extrovert. Those are core personalities. They say during this stage, one's body changes physically and one's cognitive capacity becomes fully developed. According to Erickson, identity is a solid sense of one's ideology. Yes, identity is a what? Is a sense of one's ideology. Ideology meaning how do you think about yourself? How do you think? How do you see yourself? They say philosophy. So this notion, as an individual, you commit oneself to a particular religion, if not religion, a belief system. That belief system as well could be influenced by what? Your upbringing. In religion, if you're a Christian, you believe in certain values. The way you do things according to what? Your religion. If your religion is Ushembe, if your religion is Zionist, meaning your core values will be influenced by your religion. If there are certain teachings that you are given by your parents, meaning your core values will be influenced by those teachings. We can simply say who you are is influenced by your upbringing. That is your parents, or as well as the environment. That is the stable core. It does not change. It does change, however, you will remain as a core. There will be core values that you know, that you believe in. Erikson suggests that the idea of identity describes the self as a stable core, beliefs and values. That it looks as if though we are delivered to our circumstances, yes. They say it looks as if though we are delivered to our circumstances, meaning you cannot change certain things. You cannot choose a family. You cannot choose family. At times you cannot choose an environment, meaning why they say you cannot choose, it looks like as if though you are delivered into circumstances. If you are born in an environment whereby respect is the most regarded value, chances are you'll follow the same trend. You'll respect others because we're taught. Ourselves develop as we try to make the best out of the situations which we find ourselves in. Erikson, they say ourselves develop, meaning changes as we try to make the best out of the situation we live in. An example that I made earlier under PYC1501, I said certain situations cannot change you. Depends on the individuals, if you are willing to change or not. Ourselves develops. How do we develop? Through changing. We change as we try to make the best out of the situation. You are living in the shack, in a low-class environment. It's possible to change your situation. It's possible to change your environment. The environment cannot totally influences you. They say as we try to make the best of the situation in which we find ourselves, that is developmental, it changes. Psychologically, it changes. Cognitively, it changes, meaning you can conquer the situation. Then the new person, that is yourself. Then you have who? Rogers and Maslow. They say people with high level of self-actualization are open to new experiences and can function independently, changing. You see here, they take you back and forth. They say to you at first, Erikson suggests that the idea of identity describes yourself as a core being. The core being is influenced by what? The environment, your upbringing. That is beliefs and values. They twist it a bit. They say, Erikson, ourselves do develop. Ourselves do develop, we change as we try to make the best out of the situation in which we find ourselves in. We change. We are forced to change because we interact with people, we meet people, we do certain things, we learn, we accept, we are willing to change. Then say Rogers, people with high level of self-actualization are open to new experiences. So once you open to new experiences and you can function independently, you will see change. But if you rely to people, there won't be an adequate change, efficient change. So Maslow says, and Maslow and Rogers says, according to these two thinkers, the ultimate goal of personal development is self-actualization. Self-actualization is a process whereby you achieve or fulfill your desired goals. Desired goal comes from where? Comes from the mind. Self-actualizers, they challenge their situations. They want to impact people around them. They want to succeed regardless of the circumstances put in front of them. Those are self-actualizers. This is a process through which people realize their potential. That one is not delivered in one circumstance. The conflict situation one has to deal with, but rather challenge the situation. Instead of facing the problem, you challenge the situation. They say people with high level of self-actualization are open to experiences and can function independently. They say, for example, now they are giving us an example in order to understand this. Remember what they say. People with high level of self-actualization are open to new experiences, can function independently. For example, experience comes before the self. Experience comes before the self. Remember, there was the self first, then the input. due to your experiences. So the self comes first. When you're born, the self comes first. As soon as you start to interact with the environment, in the beginning, from your parents, you learn how to suck. As a baby, you learn how to suck milk. You learn how to smile back. You know, they say, for everything, experience comes before the self. It's self first, then due to the environment you change, develop into a stable core. For humanists, the self comes before experience. The stable core changes. The stable core changes. Yes, there is a stable core, however, it changes, it develops. We need both this perspective for a comprehensive picture of ourselves. For us to define, to discuss ourselves, we need both the core self as well as what? The experiencing self. That is the stable self versus the changing self, you see? The stable self by Erickson. So the stable self, you just know that, is by Erickson. Then the changing self is mostly influenced by Rogers and Maslow. Just to sum it up. The stable self is mostly explained by Erickson, then the changing self mostly by Rogers and Maslow. Then moving on to the double self. We spoke about this core self and the changing self. Now the double self. What do you mean by double self? Do they mean I have two personalities? Am I deceiving myself? I have double self, or do I live a double life? What do they mean by the double self? Double self starts by, when I talk about myself, I am the self that is talking to myself. You see now, we are getting deep. When I talk about myself, I am the self that is talking about itself. When I'm talking about myself, I am the self that is talking about itself. The way in which we intuitively understand this is that I am the person who is aware of myself. In other words, I am the self that has a mental picture of itself. I am the self that has a mental picture of itself. Who is itself that referring to you? I am the self that has a mental picture. When you think of yourself, you wake up in the morning, you bath, then you're ready to go to work. You're ready to go to school. You're ready to go to a party. You have a self-image, even though you have taken some time to look at the mirror, to look at yourself. However, when you move, the more, when you walk, when you move, the more people are looking at you, whether they are smiling or they are frowning. In your mind, you have what? The mental picture of what they are seeing. If you feel that you are working with confidence, you have dressed nice clothes, you assume that is what they are looking at. That is I'm the self that is having a mental picture. I know of myself. I have a mental picture of myself. Of what? Of itself. Or itself, you see yourself as an object. Meaning as you move, people are looking at you. I am the self. That is a mental picture. Mental picture of what? Of itself. The itself that they are looking at. That is you. The itself that they are looking at. That is you. They say the problem is that this description of the self maintain the mental picture of itself is already a picture. Why do you use a picture? You use a picture because that's how you perceive yourself. That is how you imagine yourself. You imagine yourself through what? Pictures. Pictures in our mind. Then they continue by saying the double self. The first self you have discussed. I am the self that is the mental picture. How you see yourself. How you visualize yourself. Then they say here, I am real. I am real. I am real, and the thoughts I have about myself make a mental picture. I am real. I am a real individual. And the thoughts, you see here, they say I'm the self in the mental picture. Here they include what? The thoughts. I am real. That is one. And the thoughts I have about myself make a mental picture. What influences the mental picture are the thoughts I have about myself. That's the difference between the two. I am the self that has a mental picture. I am real. And the thought that I have makes up the mental picture. That is double self. That's how we think of ourselves. We see ourselves first as an object, the itself. We have a mental picture of who we are as a thing or as an object. Here they break it down. What makes a mental picture? The itself, what does the itself consist of? It consists of the thoughts. I am real. The thoughts that I have about myself make mental pictures. The mental picture, meaning the content that I have about myself, helps to produce the mental picture. I hope it's clear. So that's the concept of the self. How you see yourself using different aspects, using different theories. Theories like Erikson, Rogers, and Maslow. Why do we study about the self? Before we continue, the question would be, what do you have to study about the self? You are aspiring psychologist. You'll be attending to clients now and again. When someone comes in to your practice and state a problem, the person needs to be assisted. To state a problem, now you need to intervene to assist the person in solving the problem. So you cannot just solve the problem without knowing the person, the personality of the person. You cannot assume that all individuals are the same. The interventions, the mechanism that used in the first client differ from the second client because what we are unique. Ourself makes us different. Yes, they say the double self, I am the self, that is a mental picture. Meaning we have different mental pictures. I have different mental picture compared to Katrin. Katrin has a different mental picture compared to Ayanda. Ayanda has a different mental picture compared to Nadu. Okay, I'm really confused if you are supposed to learn this topic since I cannot find it in the learning resources. Okay, let me open it. I thought the topic might be phrased differently at first, but I cannot find the topic that fits in. Psychology is science, stress, interpersonal, organizational work. I'm missing something. Another. So Tiamo is trying to answer. I still just want to know as well. Okay, the self is part of the learnings under PYC 1501. You're telling me that in your assignment, you didn't find any question related to the self?
No, it didn't, sir.
Not at all?
No.
So I'm not sure. Let me check. Perhaps the chapter is not recommended this year, and I need to speak with the lecturer regarding that. You see, I'm given chapters that I need to discuss that included the self. When you say it's not part of your syllabus, meaning there could be an error. If these are your only chapters, meaning self is out. What about group functioning? Is group functioning part of your syllabus?
Yes, we have the psychology of groups. So I think that's the groups part.
Okay, yeah, the group is different from the self. Societal issues. In order for us to understand societal issues, we need to consider issues like violence, discrimination, the development of poor communities, the place to stay, preventive interventions. Those are the societal issues. How to apply psychology into society. Then I mentioned that as a psychologist, you need to be cognizant of what different aspects, factors that affect individuals. Violence, discrimination, the poor. As a psychologist, you need to know how to handle a person who's considered as not poor and the poorest. The place they stay, the preventive measures. You want to open a practice, you also consider these factors. I don't want to go to certain locations because of 1, 2, 3. These are factors that affect people. Then you start what? Violence. Violence begins when one person fails to esteem the other person. Violence begins when one person fails to esteem the other person. So it says, when you physically abuse someone or rob someone, sexually violate, domestic violate, you are doing what? You are failing to esteem the other person. you say you stop respecting the other person's dignity and start abusing him or her. Violence begins when one person fails to esteem the other person's or stop respecting the other person's dignity and start to abuse him. That is violence. There's violence for material gain, domestic violence, sexual violence, as well as there's state and collective violence, self-directed violence. These are the key forms of violence that people are facing. Let's break them down. It says violence becomes part of daily life. Violence becomes part of our daily lives. This includes psychological violence, mental violence. What do they mean by psychological violence? Is that showing itself in violence talk, intolerance of others, structural violence, showing itself in an unfair distribution of commodities as a result of class, race-based stratification in society. Violence of poverty, showing itself in indignity of subhuman living standards. They say these metaphorical forms of violence are often the source of physical violence. They say when you look at these sources of violence, mostly are related to what? Some form of a physical violence. Violence for material gain, being robbed, is physically. Domestic violence, to an extent, psychological and physical. Sexual violence, physical, whether it's touching someone inappropriate or rape, that is sexual violence. They say state and collective violence, self-directed violence. These forms of violence, they say they are physical most of the time. Then in the study material, they try to break it down for you. They say violence for material gain includes mugging, armed robbery, meaning you are failing to esteem the person, you're taking his or her belonging, you're failing to respect. Domestic violence, for example, the neglect of children. Domestic violence is broad. The neglect of children is part of the domestic violence. Battery of spouse, abuse of elders is what? Is a domestic violence. Then you have what? Sexual violence. For example, rape and sexual harassment. They're part of sexual violence. State and collective violence are what? Colonialism, apartheid, self-directed violence, self-mutilation, as well as suicide. That is a form of violence. That's why when you try to commit yourself, to commit suicide, the ambulance will be there, and also the police will be there, because they see it as a sort of violence. They need to investigate. Whether surely did you try to commit suicide or someone poisoned you, or someone gave you the tablet, someone advised you, or someone that is threatening you. Then the police, they've been involved. They include it as a violence, committing suicide. Ambulance will be there. You need to give a statement. As soon as you are sober, you need to get a statement. People that they find in the house, they need to testify. Police will come take pictures to ensure that yes, indeed, you try to commit suicide or someone tried to kill you, however, stage it as a suicide. These acts of violence do not occur in isolation. They affect one another on an individual, group, community, society level. So we need an ecological model to describe the phenomenon as complex as violence. Violence is a key issue, particularly in contexts like South Africa. Now and again, there are different forms of violence. Killing others is a form of violence. Rape is a form of violence, especially to women and children, is a form of violence. So it's a challenge. People are struggling. People are not safe walking around the streets. So it's a job as a psychologist to assist people in managing that. How do you assist? It's either people come to you to get your services, or online. There's online platforms now where people can be assisted. Some people open the pages and write the information that can assist you. Some people open the pages instead of talking face to face, perhaps you go online and communicate through chats. There are different platforms. People are not safe in walking around the streets. That's psychological trauma affects them. Hence, you must know about violence as a human behaviorist. Because cases, you imagine the cases that come to the psychologists, imagine the cases that go to the social work, doctors, therapists. You'll find that most of the cases are violence related. If it's not stress, only so when you are stressed by yourself, perhaps in unemployment, the challenge will be violence related. Three main approaches to understand violence. These are three main approaches to understand violence. Instinct or social-biological approaches. Instinct or social-biological approaches see violence as an inborn survival strategy. The instinct and social-biological approach, they see violence as an inborn survival strategy, as an inborn thing. They say instinct and social-biological approach sees violence as an inborn strategy. What do they mean? In the past, instinct enables humans to hunt for food and to react to threats. If you are faced with a challenge, what do? You fight back, or you run away. You wake up in the morning, you are taking a jog. These are the thugs trying to rob you. Two things that comes into your mind. Your life is in danger. It's a threat. How do you react to a threat? At times, if you given an opportunity and it's safe, you run away. You feel that you can overpower the people, you fight. That's why they say instinctively we have that aggressiveness within us that helps us to survive. You see violence as an inborn survival strategy. You hit back as a survival strategy is instinctively. Some people will come to you and say, perhaps you are robbed. You fight back. You end up in hospital. Perhaps they don't take your life, but you end up in hospital because you're fighting back. You are hurt badly. One person will come and say, but why did you do that? Why you didn't give them the phone? So it's difficult in this situation to manage the situation. Perhaps your phone, you were carrying your phone, waiting for an interview. They said they will call you around about 6 o'clock. Then someone comes and wants to take this phone. You don't think rationally. You want to protect your belonging. You're hijacked. You want to take your car. In your car, you have what? You have your baby. You have your family. Instinctively, there is that violent aspect that you'll portray, trying to help yourself. Whether you get hurt or not, you will think later. They say it's instinctive. It's instinctive. At times, it's difficult to control. You are born like that. When you see someone beating someone else, instinctively, there's that need to assist the person because you are born with that aggressiveness. You are born with that form of violence. That's why when you see a fly, you beat a fly. You won't say that's killing. You see a rat, you want to kill it. Because instinctively, it does not belong to your house. If someone touches you inappropriate, you hit back because you are born with that. Naturally, you are born with a form of violence, as a survivor. You see, they see violence as a survival need, not that you beat people for fun, but you see that as a survival need. It's biological. That's why you get angry. When you get angry, it's either you portray it outside or you become internally angry. Then we move on. They say frustration versus aggressive approach. Explain violence as an outcome of frustration. They explain violence as an outcome of frustration. If you are frustrated, they say you tend to be violence. Let's see how do they explain it in the textbook. When people are frustrated, they become angry. Anger leads to violent acts, especially if the frustration occurs in the context that has previously been associated with violence. Frustration, if you are frustrated. People differ. At times you'll find that you want to submit your exam, whether through a laptop or a phone. It's 11:05. You need to submit your exam. It's 5 to 11. You need to submit your exam 11 o'clock. You are trying so hard to connect. They will tell you your fellow students. If you are new, they will tell your fellow students that happens during exam. That 5 minutes you try to submit your exam. Yes, they always encourage you to submit exam at least before 30 minutes so that you manage. 5 minutes to try to submit your exam, the computer, internet is not working. You try to log in using your phone, it's not working. You are frustrated. You know what other people does? They smash the phones against the wall. It's a natural behavior. I once did it with my laptop. I smashed it with a fist. Boom. And the laptop quite. Fortunately, I had insurance. So that is frustration. Frustration aggression approach. When you are frustrated and unwilling, not your reflexes will tell you to do something. You smash something in front of you. You don't smash people, but you smash what? Normally, you smash what? Objects. Because you're frustrated. Some they smash their pens. The pens to write. That's why you find at times road rage. You are driving, now and again there's someone that is annoying you. Now and again. Some people end up stopping their car and fighting back. I'm not encouraging that too. I'm not encouraging. You stop your car and you fight back. That is frustration. The more you become frustrated, the more you boil inside. Is this what? Aggressive? Is this to anger? So it depends how you manage it. You need to be able to manage your behavior. However, here they're trying to break it down to you that you are born with aggressiveness, you are born with violence. Hence, there are rules, there are laws that you not need to do this, and that if you do this, you'll be arrested. If you do this, you'll be encouraged. It's wrong to do the 1, 2, 3. But here they break it down for you to understand yourself. That is instinctive that you act aggressively. It depends how you portray your aggressiveness. Either you play sports, either you go and play sports to release the tension within you. Against animals are good examples of the form of violence. Animals, particularly, as I explained last week, animals during mating season, they become aggressive, violent. You'll find the elephants hitting trees, breaking down the trees, breaking down the walls. Because like I said, they are born with a certain violence. Now and again, they need to release it. So animals are not like humans. We as humans, you can go to a therapist, you can talk to someone, you can watch a movie that will relaxes you. You have books to read. However, animals, they don't have that opportunity, that advantage. When they are frustrated, they take it out to the objects they see in front of them. They take it out to other animals. They take it out to other human beings. You'll find yourself being stepped by a lion. Not that perhaps you distracted the elephant. However, it's frustrated. It's mating season. They become aggressive. Normally, how do they release their tension? They need to mate because hormones are high. You'll find springboks fighting for mating. Giraffes, most of even herbivores with carnivore, they fight. To what? To portray their frustration, aggression. However, humans, we can manage. The third point is observational learning. Observational learning, they say, we learn violence through direct reinforcement, through modeling our behavior on that of others. We learn violence through direct reinforcement, through modeling our behaviors on that of others. They say, according to observational learning, we learn to be violent through direct reinforcement, through modeling our behavior. It is not only kids or children who learn through imitation, also adults learn through imitation. We see others doing certain things, we do them as well. In the South African context, the more time passes, the more crime increases. Other factors as to why crime increases that you'll find the law system in South Africa arresting certain individuals for violent behavior, whether it's rape or mugging, robbery. Week down the line, people are released by what bail. And what comes into your mind is that if I do something wrong in South Africa, I'll get arrested, next week I'll come back. Through what? Bail. Meaning it's more like they give you another opportunity to do the same activity because you are granted bail. Bail says you are free to go outside, but do attend. They will give you things that you need to do and things that you don't need to do while you're on bail. But it's difficult for them to monitor it. So observational, you as a person who's sitting and watching, is much easier. You feel like it's much easier for me to do something illegal because I'll get arrested, find a lawyer, get a bail, then I'm outside tomorrow. You rape, bail, outside. That time they tell you the docket has been lost. When the docket has been lost, meaning the case closed, you are free to leave until a person comes back and open another the case. That's when they fetch you again because the case now has been opened. Observationally, when we are looking at things far as an observer, you feel that the system perhaps is too weak for people to do as they please. Now and again, there's cable theft. If it's not Soweto, it's in Tembisa. If it's not Tembisa, tomorrow is Sentin. If it's not Sentin, tomorrow is Foy's, Postback. Now and again, it keeps on happening. This is through what? Observational learning. Because people steal it and not get arrested. Still, you get a bail. It's become easier for people to see something and do it in return. Because there's no what? The consequences, people feel like the system is too soft. Observational learning. Let's look at the example in our study material. They say to us, when I see somebody getting his way through acting violent, I'm likely to imitate his behavior. When I find myself in a similar situation, however, I see the opposite happening, namely that somebody is punished for displaying violent behavior. I'm unlikely to imitate his behavior. However, instances whereby you get into an violent act, you violate someone's rights, perhaps robbing someone, then mob justice is applied to you. Either you die or you go to hospital. Some observant might say, no, I won't. I won't do it. If I can be beaten in such extent, if police come and arrest you, as individuals we differ. If the police come and arrest you, for the fact that police took you, someone may say, no, I won't ever do that again because there are consequences. So it depends how you view the situation. You go into a store, they give you a bad service, you start complaining. You start complaining loud, you shout. Then the manager comes to you and say, sorry, ma'am, or sorry, sir, for this inconvenience. As part of us showing gratitude, you'll take 2 yogurts for free. You take 2 dairy products for free, or you'll give you a discount. Meaning that is a observational learning, but however, this is a positive observational learning. Then you learn that if I raise my voice high, the person who's looking, watching you, will know that no. In order for things to work, you need to raise up your voice. You need to speak up. You need to stand for your rights. Then you'll get a discount. You'll see now and again people will shout at the cashier, at the till, knowing that they have the right, and you need to show them respect in terms of what, giving them a discount or a bonus to show that you don't accept bad customer service. That is observational learning. That is observational learning. We learn through violence, through direct reinforcement, through modeling other people's behavior. Last week I made also interesting example about the looting that happened in South Africa last year, particularly in Gauteng as well as Durban. If you look at the scenes, whether TV or you observe them directly, few people will start looting at the shops. We observant, you just sit and watch. Now, again, the more you sit there, you ask yourself, where are the police? Where's the Metro Police? Who's stopping these people? As an observant, then you start following the same bad behavior. You start running. You yourself, you were reprimanding people at first that they shouldn't do that. But you see now they're benefiting illegally. There's no law that is confronting them. Now it starts running, says one, looting. That is what observational learning, because there are no consequences, you are more likely to do it. Through observation, you observe first, no action, you do it. You learn through observation. You observe and practice the same thing. So we are done with observational learning. So let's move on to discrimination. Discrimination says, what is first of all, is discrimination? Discrimination is a negative behavior towards members of a particular group. A negative behavior towards members of the particular group. When you say you are discriminative against others, meaning you portray a negative behavior towards other people through the acts of saying you saying certain words or you do certain things that will make that to conclude that you are you are being discriminative. This happens through what is usually based on a stereotypical ideas about a group which lead to prejudice against its members. Stereotyping ideas will be taxi drivers. All taxi drivers are like this. They are rude. They are uneducated. All taxi drivers are Zulus. If you encounter a challenge, a taxi driver, you think of a Zulu. If now I may ask you, if you think of a taxi rank, regardless, you think of the Zulus. They'll tell you, at not rank, this what has happened. You say, oh, the Zulus, Mazulu. Meaning that's a form of a stereotype, a form of discrimination. Xhosa women will tell you. Perhaps my mother telling me, Sia, please, my son, don't come with a Xhosa woman in my house because they will chow you money. You see, it's a stereotype, a form of a discrimination. It's a stereotype, meaning it's an ideas that we have towards other members surrounding us. That is the form of discrimination. Favoring certain groups compared to others, favoring certain groups over others. White people are like this, Afrikaners are like this, Basutus are like this. Whether it's something that is positive or negative, however, it's based on what prejudice ideas. They say to you, this discrimination, stereotyping idea will lead to prejudice against its members. Then what is prejudice? First, the statute idea, the negative behavior towards others, which lead to prejudice. They say prejudice is a specific form of an attitude that is negative. It's characterized by hateful and irrational beliefs. Attitude is a form of, now you are not saying anything, however, we can see it in your attitude. Perhaps I'm standing in a train, let's assume that I hate Shanghainese. The next thing you stand next to me, I move away. Because I've developed hate toward that tribe. You have developed hate towards white people. You have developed a hatred towards certain members of the community. That's the prejudice, an attitude that is negative, which is characterized by hatefulness and irrational beliefs. Because you believe that these people are like this, then you try by all means that you don't associate yourself with those people. Hatefulness and irrational belief, that is prejudice. So prejudice is an attitude that you portray. Whereas discrimination is what? Behavior. Negative behavior, mostly negative attitude, negative behavior. They say discrimination is influenced by what? The stereotyping ideas, things that you say. So yes, they say behavior because it's things that you say. You don't keep them into your mind, but things that you've been saying or things that have been said, which leads to prejudice. Once it leads to prejudice, you've heard something, you've seen something. Now you take action. Take action by perhaps de-associating yourself with the Zulus or whites because of the ideas that you get from stereotyping. Then you have an attitude now towards that culture. That attitude you have is hateful, irrational beliefs. Stereotyping ideas about the group is based on ignorance, false and incomplete knowledge about it. You see? Stereotyping ideas are based on what? Ignorance. Ignorance when you say these people are like this. Perhaps you have been hurt by one tribe. You have been hurt by a Swati guy. You start saying, I don't trust Swati guys. I'll never date a Swati guy. Please, my sister, help me. Don't date Swati guy. That's your advice. Your psychological aspects, advising other people that I don't trust Swati guys. I rather date the Sutus, Makossas, and the Zulus. Because one person hurt you. They say that could be any ignorance, a fault in your analysis because you've got incomplete knowledge. They said 1, 2, 3, you have incomplete knowledge, then you start using as a form of your understanding, form of your analysis. They say stereotype and prejudice are belief system. Yes, stereotype and prejudice are belief system. Whether you have learned or it is you who came up with it. However, it is a form of what? Belief system because you believe in it. Once you believe in it, you influence others to believe in it. Stereotype, prejudice, as well as belief system. When you look at the notes, they break it down. Discrimination, they break it. Discrimination in certain aspects. Number one, they say to you, discrimination happens when these beliefs are translated into practice. So you cannot see whether you have some form of discrimination or form of a prejudice if you don't display it. Discrimination happens when these beliefs are translated into practice that results in privilege, status due to someone's power, expenses. For example, a manager may believe that women do not have a good business sense. So they say a manager might think that women do not have a good business sense. That is stereotyping ideas about women. Therefore, decide to appoint a man instead of a woman. That is discrimination in practice. They say discrimination based on gender of a person is called sexism. So discrimination based on gender is called what? Sexism. Discrimination usually occurs against women rather than men because of the ideology that women are inferior. So discrimination mostly happens in women, affects women because the system, especially patriarchal system, see men as superior than women. That is a form of discrimination. Then they further say the notion that discursive practice play a cardinal role in discrimination has shifted from focus from ideology to ideological practice. They break it down so as they say, following this trend, contemporary studies about racism, now we're on racism. We said women, now it's racism. They say, following this trend, contemporary studies about racism emphasize the role of racism discourse in this way, that you understand what's race. When you say racism, we think of race. For example, in liberal newspaper article about violence, Black people have been depicted as an innately violent and trustworthy subhumans that should be termed racial bias against white, childlike in a sense of not acting responsibly, unreasonable. So you also see this perhaps in the newspaper, some form of discrimination, but they don't display them verbally or thorough. Have you seen the controversy by shops like Clicks, shops like H&M? That's why they're saying at some there's that ideology now and again that portrays racism, discrimination. In modern, they say in modern racism, there is no direct denigration of Black. Modern racism occurs because in racist remarks, jokes that group of all color makes about themselves. Now and again. So they're saying not all forms of discriminations are negative. Some are positive. However, that is discrimination. One. The development of poor communities. The development of poor communities, they say, poverty is not simply about being deprived of necessities such as food, medicine, clothing, but also about living situations of hopelessness, uncertainty about the future, alienation in the mainstream. They say poverty is not only about lacking physical needs. Poverty is not only about not lacking financial assistance, not having money, food, medicine, and clothes. Poverty is a worldwide phenomenon. Globally, as many as 1 in 5 is poor around the world, particularly in Africa. Poor countries have a high infant mortality rate, low infant expectations. They also have high than normal incidence of physical and mental fitnesses. However, they say to us, as a psychologist, or the human behaviorist psychologist, poverty is not only physical, but also about the living a situation of hopelessness. So living in a situation where there's no hope, you don't have faith, you don't see yourself changing the circumstances, you don't see yourself moving out of the lowest class society, moving out of poverty. Uncertainty, you are uncertain about future. Alienation in the mainstream, that is poverty. That's why some people, they say, you have what? You have poverty mentality. Meaning they don't see yourself as a person who will be able to move out of that situation. That is poverty. Poverty, they say, is physical and it's also in your mind. When you look at the situation and believe that, no, I won't change it, I'll die poor. That is poverty. They call it poverty mentality. The development of poor communities, they are poor physically as well as they are poor psychologically. That is poverty. So we'll go through it as you going through your notes. A community is more than, they say they're trying to explain this in more detail. They say to you, a community is more than just a physical, geographic entity. It consists of people who experience a sense of belonging to the physical place as well as one another. There is a transitional relationship between the community and its members. This means that the community and its members play a role to one another. What I'm trying to say here, You can live in a community whereby you have food, you have medicine, you have proper clothing. However, if there is a breakdown in the belongingness, if you don't feel that you are part of that community, chances are you won't live a happy life. You will move out because there's no sense of belonging. People in that location, they don't accept you, they don't appreciate you. You have everything, but the environment is not conducive for you. They say that is part of the development of poor communities. You will suffer internally. There are three aspects of community membership. So for you to feel a sense of belonging in your community, they say the first is that people feel they have contributed to the community and invested in it. They need to contribute and invest in the community. If not, you're not appreciated, then you're doomed. Here we're talking about mostly township, not suburb area. You'll find suburb area that you live in the morning, you go to work. When you come back, you go to your house. There's no need to interact with other community members. Even the walls, you'll see they're so big that there's no need for interaction. You're only minding your business and they're minding their business. So according to this, that is not a fully community, because community, you need to what? To interact. You have to find in certain locations the CPF, crime prevention forums, where the community help one another in dealing with crime. You'll find in some locations there are soup kitchens. They have rehabilitation centers for people who are smoking drugs. There's that unity. When there's a funeral, members that know that you need to go to the Zwane family to mourn with them, to show them support. When there's a cow that needs to be slaughtered, you need to be there to assist. You need to be there to assist with wages. That's what they say. That is the need for, that's a sense of belonging within the poor communities. That's how they live, by assisting one another. If no one does that to you, if no one assists you in that regard, you feel a sense of loneliness, sense of isolation, because you feel that you don't belong. Then they say the first is that people feel they have contributed in their communities, they invested in it. The second aspect involves boundaries. Boundaries may be physical, psychological, but they create a distinction between us and others. So we find in some communities, they us and others. Us and others. Us as one family, we are us. Others, the external. It's not my problem that they're suffering. It's not my problem that there's a burial there. I focus on myself. There will be funeral next door. Next door, there's a party. I don't give a damn. You find people like that. You're planning to have a party on the 20th. Suddenly, one of your neighbor passes away. You're forced to postpone your party. Others say, no. It's their business, and I also have my problems. They say barriers may be physical or psychological within the communities. There's no togetherness. The third aspect refers to advantages of membership. Being a member of the community offer emotional security as well as a sense of belonging within the community. I think we have covered that. Number two, the place to stay. The place to stay is influenced by what? The environment as physical place, the environment as an extension of the self, the environment as a social system. The environment as a social system. It says colonialism did not only mean the political subjection, economical exploitation of people. It also causes tremendous psychological harm by alienating people. So they say a place to stay. They're giving us an opening sentence. They say colonialism did not only mean political subjugation, political separation, or economic exploitation of people. However, what it did, the colonialism, it also caused tremendous psychological harm by alienating people, by creating a separation in their land. Today, we understand the strong feelings that fueled the anti-colonialism movement. People need to return to the land of their forefathers. That's what they say. The environment has significant psychological value in terms of psychological, physical, as well as other social features. To take people's land away from them is not simply to rob them their physical location, but also to take away the piece of their personhood, their belonging. People's environment are extension of themselves. Their physical location in which their entire social network are anchored. That is psychology in society. They say the environment not only influences you psychologically, but it influences you not only it affects you physically, not only is your physical belonging sense, it's also your psychological influences or psychological environment. They say the environment is a physical place. Is a physical place. They eat. The environment is an extension to the self. Yes, the environment is an extension to the self, meaning, okay, let's break down the physical place first, then I explain the extension to the self. They say, when physical place, when people move into a new environment for the first time, they are actually aware of its characteristics such as shapes, noise, and color. As they cycle into the environment, the physical features become less obstructive, but the environment continues to influence them. Its physical characteristics determine how people move and interact in the environment. Some influences are subtle than others. Color, texture, the smell create atmosphere. Okay, let me sum this up. You decide with your family that you want to relocate and get a new place to stay. By considering a new place to stay, you consider aspects like the physical place, the place because it's expensive, or so is staying there. You look at other aspects, deep aspects. Will I connect to that environment? What do I like? Do I like the nature? When I like nature, perhaps you go for a plot. You buy a plot whereby you'll be mostly interact with the environment, the nature. If you don't want an extension to physical environment, perhaps you just choose a channels that you have your own you're a gardener. You don't pay too much levy in order for your house, your yard to be clean. There are people who do that, which minimize less interaction with other people. Basically, minding your own business, depending on the environment. So the environment is your physical space. It depends on what you choose. Some people will like houses next to the river, the ocean. Some like noisy places. Some like places we are near to the mall, near to the schools. So it depends on the needs in relation with you and your family. That is a physical place. Then the environment is an extension of the self. The environment is an extension of the self is an environment may cause us to experience strong emotions attached to all aspects of the environment, to the extent that we feel as though our inner being is expressed in or through it. So there are places where you feel at home automatically. You can differentiate it. You'll find that when you go to certain places, it's easier for you to even get some sleep compared to other places, regardless of noise. There are places which are connected to you emotionally, or the sense of belonging. They connect with you. Now and again, we like to visit certain places because there's this extension to the self. They say it becomes something through which we can express ourselves in a sense, in an extension of our self-identity. Who and what we are is expressed in terms of the qualities of the environment. When we are so close-tied in a particular place, it is very hard to let go of it. This is the situation whereby that's one I grew up in Soweto, born and bred in Soweto. Then things get better in life. You get your career, then you decide to move. Now I'm moving to Sentin. However, now and again, you'll see yourself in Soweto. You want to go out, you go to Soweto. You want to meet up, to chill with your friends, you think of Soweto, meaning the environment has an extension to the self. Regardless of where you move or you go, the environment is an extension of the self. You feel better when you are in that place. The environment is an extension of the self. Then we have environment as a social system. Environment as a social system, they say there are 4 elements. There are 4 elements that characterize the social aspect of the environment. These elements are privacy, personal space, territorial, and crowding. Let's start with privacy. They say the desire for privacy is not the need to be alone. There's a difference between privacy and being alone. You wanting to be alone is not just privacy. Privacy could be putting a pin on your phone. That is privacy, because you don't want people to see your personal stuff. That is privacy. Privacy is being with people who share information about themselves, but I decide to keep quiet, that I don't want to share anything with others. That is my privacy. I choose to do that. It's privacy. Privacy is divided into 3 functions. It establishes boundaries between us and others, creating personal space. These boundaries can be physical, for example, closed door or psychological, for example, refraining from answering certain questions because I feel they are private. 2, we say it enables us to control how much others know about us. The control can be formal or informal. Informal control is how much you tell others about yourself. Formally refers to official agreements you sign with organizations. So informal is information that you share with others. Could be your friends, your neighbors, certain family members. You choose not to tell them certain information because you feel like the information is private. They are non-assigned documents. They tell you, do you want to disclose this to others or any other financial institution? That is perhaps a formal control. Lastly, private also allows us the opportunity for self-reflection. We need time to ourselves to do what? Some self-introspection. That is privacy. Then there's personal space. What's the difference between the two? Privacy and personal space. They say personal space refers to the amount of space we need between ourselves and others. The amount of space we need between ourselves and others. The spacing. We all keep people in certain physical distance. So spacing is a physical distance. I need my space. When I conduct this class, I need my space. I make sure that I move away from people. I need personal space. Distance, physically, I need personal space. COVID regulations, they talk about personal space, not privacy. You don't need privacy, but you need what? Personal space, the distance. If they come too close, we begin to feel uncomfortable. We may turn and move away. The minimum distance that we allow between ourselves and others is called personal space. Different individuals have different personal space. Some people are more comfortable than others in allowing people to be close to them, but we're also different. For different people we interact with, yes. For different people we interact with, there should be a level of personal space. Perhaps I'm more comfortable to be close to my partner, my girlfriend. Maybe I'm more comfortable to be close to my girlfriend compared to another man. So that is privacy. It's personal space depending on other people. I can be close with people that I know compared to strangers. I'm not comfortable. That's personal space. Then we have got territorial. Territorial refers to a place we select that we demarcate as our own. When we get into other people's space, they have to adhere to our rules. For instance, you pay visits to a certain household. Normally, you knock, you get in. They say to you, take a seat, and they show you the seat, the specific seat that you need to use. Suddenly, you choose your own chair, then your own seat, sitting. Then someone comes to you and says, no. Only the sits there. Only the manager sits there. Only the head of the company sits there. Don't use that chair. That is territorial. Territoriality. It's based on spacing as well. To maintain what? Mostly to maintain social order. For example, the head of the household often has its own chair or own seat in the house. Territoriality, you see again in animals, particularly lions. Lions have a specific places where they sit or they hang out. Normally on top of the rocks, because they believe that they are the king of the jungle. They need to see everything. They like tallest rocks. They use rocks or mountains to hang out so that they can see everything, meaning lions are territorial. Carnivores, whether it's a lion, bears, leopards, they are territorial. Now and again, you'll see them peeing around their location, around their territory, to show that there's a man here or there's a dangerous animal here, whether it's female or male. Crowding. Crowding is our subjective experience of the number of people around us. That is crowding. The subjective experience of a number of people around us. To you, to some people, 5 people could be a crowd. They prefer 2 people. So crowd depends on the individual. To me, perhaps crowd will be 120 people. Thousands is a crowd. But we differ. Some people, 5 is a crowd. They say it is important to note that crowding is psychological experience or physical situation. In other words, it is not just the number of people in a particular area, but our experiences of a number of people that is important. For example, you and I may be in a room of 20 people, and I may experience the situation is crowded, whereas you may not. Experience of crowding also depends on the circumstance. I may feel crowded in a room of 20 people if you are all waiting for it to be interviewed. So this is interesting. They say to us, you might find that you don't experience any challenges with a crowd, whether it's 1,000 people or 100 people. However, when they say to you, you're about to present a speech, that's where you fear a crowd, because you have given a task to do something. Normally, you find yourself at home with your friends, you dance, you sing along, you do sing along. However, if they're given an opportunity to do that in front of 20 people, then you start shivering because of the crowd. The crowd is different, the crowd is huge. That's what they are saying. You're in a class, I ask you questions, you do participate, you involve yourself in a class, then I say to you, Ayanda, because I can see that you have a knowledge based on the topic societal issues. Can you please stand up and explain the term crowding to the class? Now I'm given an opportunity to stand up and explain. It was easy for you to explain while sitting down. Now I say explain. That's where the crowd comes in. They say crowd is subjective, it's personal. It depends on the circumstances, the situation. Lastly, preventive interventions. Research indicates that most emotional and behavioral problems have their origin in the environment, characterized by what? Preventive measures are necessary to counter this problem. Preventive measures. One thing that is nice about psychology, they give you aspects, factors. Then in the end, you notice that in the end, they'll give you solutions and how to manage those things. Societal issues, the last chapter, they say preventive measures. How can you manage certain issues? Preventive measures, they are necessary to counter what? The effects. Research indicates that most emotional and behavioral problems have its origins in the environment, characterized by poverty and violence. And you, as a psychologist, you need to consider that each and every problem is the start, there's a beginning to influence each and every problem. Emotional abuse, behavioral abuse could be due to unemployment. That is what? Characterized by what? We can say employment and associated with poverty. It could be a certain forms of violence. Then you become emotional. You consult a psychologist. They say preventive measures are necessary to counter these effects. However, despite the fact that numerous studies have pointed to the positive benefit of preventive measures, in this area has been neglected. They say psychology as a profession has continued to apply its energies to the treatment rather than preventive of illness. For example, services are aimed at victims of violence, which is curative approach. So they say here, yes, there is a high number of unemployment, poverty, violence that you're experiencing in the society. There are preventive measures that you can do in order to assist us in managing the situations. Part of the solutions that we can come across is, they say, we can open, if you are experiencing drug problem, let's as a community, perhaps write a petition or do something that will assist to rehabilitate people. If there's poverty physically, what about opening a kitchen to assist people to eat? Or open what you call in schools. In schools, they have what? I forgot, feeding scheme, yes. We open a feeding scheme so that the kids can eat. To develop their cognitive development. There should be clinics within the government. There should be government bodies that assist. There should be churches. The one that I mentioned, CPF, Crime Prevention Forum, because you can't wait for the government in certain instances in order to apply preventive measures in the communities. We can open soup kitchen, so we can do it ourselves. That's what I trained. There are so many preventive measures. Instead of focusing on the problem, there are so many interventive measures that you need to apply in order to solve certain problems. So that is societal issues. Chapter 5, violence, discrimination, the development of poor communities, a place to stay, preventive what? Measures. Okay, guys, I'm done for today regarding societal issues.